Thank you. Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started with the Ward 3 ward meeting tonight. First off, I wanted to thank all the staff who's here in attendance. We've got well over a dozen staff and other members from police, from community housing, as well as Windsor Fire and Rescue. So thank you to all of them to giving up their evening to join us, as well as Mayor Drew Dawkins. I'm going to start off with just going through a few issues quickly, just some highlights of some of the things we've been working on in case some of the questions, and then I'll pass it over to the mayor for his comments, and then we'll get going to question period. So first off, I wanted to start off by addressing some of the investments that we've seen in our parks. The Parks Department has been busy planting trees. Between this year and next year, we will see over 150 new trees on the public right-of-ways in the ward. A lot of the other, there's been some new work to different monuments and sculptures in Jackson Park, but you'll notice the biggest work is the work on the new greenhouses in Jackson Park, well underway now. If you drive down McDougall, you'll see the huge structure. Excited to have it ready for next spring. As well, there's more work being done to Festival Plaza, the roof replacement there. It's a new green roof. And the Legacy Beacon that we just passed, that will be where the NFL park is now. The playground will be moving over to the foot of Church Street, and the Legacy Beacon with concession stand and the streetcar will be where the NFL playground park is currently at the foot of Karen. The aside from the parks investments, one of the recent things in the news was the Festival Plaza canopy. We moved ahead at our last council meeting, or 2 council meetings ago, with the investment for administration to come back with options. We heard loud and clear from the community that $35 million might not have been the way they wanted to go. So we're asking for options that will also include the $35 million option, and then we will be going to do public consultation as well with that motion to refer back to administration. I did ask also for a report back on how the waterfront, specifically Festival Plaza, will connect to the rest of downtown, and looking at potential physical changes to Riverside Drive to make it more pedestrian and cycling friendly and safer for everybody to use. Another report that was passed recently was council supported going back to administration to create alley standards. It's something that's been a big issue ever since I was elected. A lot of core neighborhoods obviously have alleys, and we've never had minimum standards in alleys, and so there was never really specific work done other than repaving alleys after a certain amount of time. And now we're hoping that that alley standards report would hopefully come back sometime next year. After that report comes back, we would then start allocating capital dollars so that you might see improvements to your alleys in the future. Next, traffic calming measures. City Council passed resolutions where each councillor will have up to $10,000 to use for small traffic calming initiatives in the ward. Starting next spring, you will start to see some of the signage across the city in the different wards, but also as well in different neighborhoods in the ward. They will be small things, whether they're small signs in the street, or there are options for things like speed bumps and things like that, but those are least likely option. But if there are issues with speeding or traffic calming issues in your neighborhood, please send me an email and we can actually look at it to see what we can do with that minimal budget that we have. So we're looking to do something in the spring of next year. Another big issue that has been at the forefront was the consumption and treatment center, or the CTS, or safe injection site, that the Windsor Essex County Health Unit has been the lead on preparing an application for Windsor. They are at the formal stage where they have looked at a site at 628 Goyu, which is on the block just south of Wyandotte, near Goyu, across the street from the McDonald's, is where everybody will recognize that from. They have been working for well over a year on this proposal. They've engaged a lot of stakeholders, including a lot of the residents, a lot of the business owners, the BIA in that area, that location or endorsement of that location will be coming to council sometime in the next month or so. After that, if it's endorsed by City Council, it will move ahead and the application will go to the federal government. We do have members of Windsor Police here who did work on that project and on the plan for that. I know that there's been a lot of concern and about the issues and what that neighborhood may deal with after it's opened. But I can say that there's been a lot of pre-work done, looking at security plans, looking at the entire area, creating sort of a zone from a crime prevention standpoint. So and we do have members of Windsor Police here available for questions for that. As well, in the news, you might have noticed that the Downtown Mission has a new temporary executive director. They will be looking for a new executive director full-time. The Mission is not an entity run by the city, but we are encouraged with some of the changes there. So we're hoping that we can solidify a new relationship with them, because there have been a lot of questions about their potential move to McDougall or the move to Elliott and Olette. I can say at this time, neither of the proposals have been approved through the planning department or through city departments. From what I've heard, that the McDougall location was dropped, but I haven't been able to confirm that. I haven't been able to meet with the new executive director yet, but I will look forward to meeting with her sometime soon. The last few items, and I'm going to, before I pass it over to the mayor, was just a lot of the issues that were tied over the last year. We've seen a lot of investments in a lot of the social issues we see in our core things tied to housing, homelessness. Housing has become one of the pressing issues across our community, but specifically how it ties to homelessness. We've seen a lot of new investment from the federal government, from the provincial government. We were able to purchase a hotel on Tuscarora, which would be the new home for the Welcome Center shelter for women. That will be looking to open in the spring of 2022. So we're excited for that, because it would allow the women and families to have one singular location. And it's a newer hotel that came with funding to renovate it, and that center will be run by the Welcome Center, who's been a great partner with the city for many years. So we feel that it'll be a great fit for the neighborhood there as well. There's also a lot of questions about the H4 Center, which is at Waterworld, which is the day center for homelessness. We have decided, council did endorse and direct administration to look for a more permanent site for that location. I know there will be a lot of questions on that. I've received a lot of emails and questions about that specific location, how it ties into the community housing that's right behind that location, as well as the park, and concerns from parents and families who use that park. So we do have staff ready to take questions on that. And once the mayor is done with his comments, I think I'll look to either Yelena or Debbie from our social services department to speak about some of the investments in the housing. So at this point, I'd just like to introduce Mayor Drew Dawkins.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Bortolin. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for carving out some time this evening to be here to have a conversation. And I look forward, much like I'm sure Councillor Bortolin and all the other councillors, to get back to in-person ward meetings. And I think 2022 is going to be the year that we're going to be able to do that. And I want to just say, with respect to COVID, I know this has been a difficult time on many fronts for many individuals in the community. Reno talked about the H4 Center. We talked about some of the things that are going on that relate to COVID that were exacerbated by the pandemic, and we see more activity on the streets. And there have been challenges. There have been challenges in every family, every business, every organization, and it's not lost on myself or anyone on City Council or our city administration that when I look out my window right now at the casino, we've got 1,100 people who are still not back to work. Knowing the news that's coming from Stellantis at the second shift because of COVID disruptions in the supply chain, there's jeopardy with 1,800 families in our community, and of course all the supply chain spinoff there. And so those are concerning elements for all of us, which is why as we work through our budget process, which will come to City Council for deliberation on December the 13th, we're going to be very strategic in our investments, making sure that we're very sensitive to what's going on in the community today. as we have been since the beginning of the pandemic, managing finances with the city. Last year, all of our deficits were covered. The team here managed all of the expenses very, very well. The deficits were covered through state safe restart funding. And when we look at the deficit projecting to the end of this year, on the city side, very, very manageable, just under $3 million. It's really airport and tunnel where we see losses. And again, we're going to the federal and provincial governments to ask for support, as any other municipality in our situation would do. And you see decisions that were made with respect to the ongoing closure of international traffic at the airport. Definitely is a federal policy decision that has an impact on the taxpayers here. So it's right for us to go and seek funding. But all in all, the finances are being managed very, very well. Council's done a good job keeping their eye on the ball and making sure that we control spending in a very difficult time. The two other things I would mention just relate to the hospital and the fact the Premier was here with the Minister of Health just a couple of weeks ago announcing that with a $10 million check announcing the hospital is moving to the next phase. And I would just underscore that that investment out on County Road 42 also comes with investment downtown to make sure that there is a presence in the downtown core on the current Windsor Regional or old Hotel du Grace or Hotel du site on Olette Avenue. And the last thing I'll mention before I turn back to the councillor is Windsor Works. City Council recognizes where we are as a community and recognizes that we need to make sure that we are diversifying our economy, that we're looking forward to the future of this community and setting and planting the seeds and setting the stage for future success, not just of this city council, but future city councils who will continue to build on the success that we found ourselves having here, but making sure that we can continue to build a success for the city as a whole. And so Windsor Works has been our guiding roadmap. Council unanimously endorsed that project, and there was a commitment financially to start funding and building out the framework that is going to allow us to do some pretty great things moving forward in the next several years and probably over the next decade. And so that's very good news, and it's an important guiding document that links the university, it links the college, it links industry here, and it really sees the city playing a role that's appropriate for the city to play, which is bringing the parties together and leading economic development when it relates to city-specific initiatives and city-specific issues. So I thank Councillor Bortolin and all of the other councillors for supporting that document and saying and recognizing the need that we have as a community to make sure that when we get news of a second shift being canceled, that we don't have that discomfort, that we start building a resiliency and putting shock absorbers in place into our economy that allow us to be successful moving forward. So with that, I'm happy to listen to all of your questions and respond to any that are appropriate for me, and appreciate a chance to speak. Councillor Bortolin.
Thank you. I wanted to build off of that last point of Windsor Works, and I received a couple of messages after I believe it was not the last meeting, but the meeting before, where we endorsed the first steps of the implementation plan. And some of the concerns were questioning, the need for and the focus on economic development, and why we had what was formerly known as WEEDC, the Windsor Essex Economic Development Commission, which is now Invest Windsor Essex, IWE, and why we need to do those things internally. So I wanted to ask Mr. Raynar, Jason Raynar, who is our new CAO, or not that new, I guess. I don't know how long we can keep calling him the new CAO, but new within the last 6 months. And I just wanted to ask Jason to comment on it as far as both what the first steps are, because I think the mayor did a good job outlining as far as why we were looking at something like Windsor Works, but with people in the community looking to understand what the plan entails and what it means for internal administration to be running that plan and why. And if you can just please comment, Jason.
Certainly happy to be here, Councillor Bortolin. Thanks very much for the opportunity, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, delighted that Council endorsed and approved the Windsor Works implementation plan. And in a lot of ways, this is about how we begin to look at all of the services and programs and infrastructure that we provide through that lens of economic development. We know that improving the quality of life for the people here in Windsor, for our residents, helps us retain talent and attract talent that ultimately then feeds the new businesses and those companies that want to locate here. It's a critical decision factor. We know as they look for places to locate their businesses and to grow their businesses, is to be able to get that talent. So we see it really as a circle that includes just about every one of our businesses. And so we're very excited to be able to look and have the resources at how we do business here, how we can be faster, more efficient, reduce red tape, and deliver the kinds of facilitation and support to all of the really good agencies and businesses that are trying to survive, that are trying to recover from COVID. And so I'm excited by the projects that are in the implementation plan, and they're really diverse. Everything from looking at the film industry, should we get into that with more significant support or not? Should our eggs go in a different basket? So we're still learning and working through that, but very excited, and the resources are there to make sure that the city places economic development in that priority list and is resourcing it appropriately.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it. The next item I just wanted to shift to is probably the single biggest item that I get emails constantly about, and it really has to do with the social issues that we experience in the downtown and we see visibly in our downtown. And a lot of the emails and the conversations start with, we've even seen, how can we expend money and put money aside for something like a beacon when we're not dealing with the social issues. And I wanted to give a brief recap before I turn it over to some staff to talk about the things that are happening in our downtown core. And we've seen probably over the last 4 to 5 years, or at least 3 to 4 years, a huge upswing in issues tied to homelessness, but also mental health issues and addictions issues. And those issues are being dealt with daily. I mean, these are items and issues that I probably have some conversation about almost every day. I convene a safety and security roundtable that includes members from Canadian Mental Health Association, Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital, Windsor Police, the BIA, residents from the downtown area, Family Services Windsor Essex, who runs our outreach program, St. Leonard's House, and also from the city. And when we bring together all those partners, we've actually seen collaborations that have really worked. The Most Van, which is the mobile outreach team that was put together with a few partners coming together to have a van present in the downtown core with outreach workers, trying to engage people experiencing homelessness and trying to connect them with the services. This happens on a daily basis. Family Services Windsor Essex runs the outreach program. We've been working with the BIA, who, when businesses are experiencing issues with individuals experiencing homelessness or other issues that's infringing on their business, we ask that they call oftentimes the outreach workers as opposed to police. Windsor Police has created a great partnership with Family Services Windsor Essex. They've also recently signed an MOU to work with Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital with mental health workers working in tandem with police on crisis calls, people experiencing mental health. But I wanted to underscore something really critically important. We talk a lot about what can happen and what we need to do, and a lot of the focus oftentimes lands on police. And I will hear probably almost daily between phone calls or emails about issues that, Windsor Police didn't respond to this, or there's this issue and police isn't responding. One of the biggest problems that we're facing is that Windsor Police is now on the hook to deal with all these social issues. And it's not something that police have ever been intended to deal with, but that's what the growing numbers of calls in the call volume now are dealing with social issues tied to mental health, addictions, homelessness. And the police have been doing a fantastic job at trying to get out to those calls in a timely manner, working with other agencies, with Family Services, with Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital. There is a lot of work happening behind the scenes on a daily basis to try to address these issues. But I do have to make it clear that this is not an issue. What we're seeing here in Windsor is not unique to Windsor. I was on a call just yesterday with the mayor of Cambridge, who had similar issues and wanted to learn about the process that we went through for our CTS, or our safe injection site. And so Every community up the 401, every mid-sized city is now dealing with very similar issues in their downtown cores, in their municipalities. This is not a way to excuse it, but this is a much larger problem that the municipal tax base and your municipal tax dollars was never intended to deal with. These are huge health issues, Ministry of Health issues. We desperately need more money for addiction services. Currently, right now, if you wanted to enter an addiction treatment center, we probably have at least a 60-day wait, if not longer, 70 to 90 days in most facilities. And as well in mental health, for acute mental health, for people who are experiencing acute episodes on the street today, there are very few resources and beds available for those people. And so with respect to the homelessness, which I will get to in a moment to pass along to staff, we have seen actually record investments this year because the other levels of government, both the federal and provincial governments, have been putting money into homelessness. But we do have a housing issue, and we have a housing issue pretty much at every level. And so not just affordable housing, but we also lack housing in the mid-range income levels and high income levels. So with all the new students in town, with all these pressures, we find that it's also hard to house people sometimes, especially if they need supports for those housing. So I wanted to call on either Yelena or Debbie from, Yelena is the Commissioner of Human and Health Services, and Debbie Cerconi is the Executive Director of Housing and Children's Services. Just to speak briefly about both the investments that we've seen, being able to purchase the hotels, COVID dollars that have been able to go to adding outreach workers, and also what we've done at the H4 Center, and then the future plans for that. So I'll turn it over to them for brief comments.
Thank you, Councillor. I will get started on this. Appreciate the opportunity, and good evening, everyone. In terms of the shelter that Councillor Bortolin mentioned, that is located in the downtown area, it will house women and families in one location. The other two shelters that we work with, the other shelter that we work with is the Salvation Army, and they service men, and the mission is not funded by the city on a permanent basis, but temporarily through COVID funding. And they will house up to 32 women and up to 16 families in that location, and it will be staffed 24 hours a day. The Housing and Homelessness Help Hub was established in May of last year as a result of COVID, and its purpose is twofold. At the time of COVID, when everything was locked down and shut down, people experiencing homelessness did not have a place to go during the day. So we established that hub in order to allow for people to have a place to go during the day when they were not in emergency shelter. And secondly, it allowed us to help the emergency shelters allow for health and safety protocols in order to help keep people safe. So as you know, if you're living in a congregate site, you can't distance, and there were certain places in those facilities where distancing was not possible, or they were offering programming. So the alternative was to offer the H4, and people could go during the day to get the supports that they needed. It is staffed from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. By an organization named Housing Information Services. On an average day, we have about 100 people who attend. They come, they get a snack. They can meet with a number of agencies who are located on site. We have a nurse practitioner there. Right now, we are just starting some primary care support. So doctors, physicians are locating at that site to help with the primary care needs of the individuals. And the staff are engaged not only with the individuals, but they try and engage with the broader neighborhood as well in terms of helping them to with any issues that might come up related to the H4. So this is a temporary location, and as Councillor Bortolin mentioned, in July of this year, Council approved the creation of a permanent housing hub. And we have started the process to engage with a consulting firm who is going to go out into the community and do consultations with key stakeholders on what a housing help hub would look like on a permanent basis. And we would look at some other opportunities to expand the supports and services that are available. One of the primary services is housing, and we have been successful through the Housing and Homelessness Help Hub in getting people housed through that program. We have added 2 additional outreach workers to our complement of 4 currently that are in Windsor and Essex County, keeping in mind that some of our outreach is also available in the county. And those workers have been added and are working through the areas of need within the city of Windsor. The upper levels of government have assisted us with a great deal of funding to help not only for a COVID response, but also we will be expanding housing options in the community to address the core issue of the fact that people experiencing homelessness do not have permanent housing. So in the next year to year and a half, the community will see, in addition to the Meadowbrook project, which is 145 units, which will be completed in the summer of next year, they will see an additional 30 to 40 units that will help serve populations that are experiencing homelessness, including youth, families, and into single individuals. So there will be a lot of activity in the next year and a half related to housing. And definitely we are aware of the issues that are happening and working to try and through our different resources to help support people experiencing homelessness.
Thank you, Debbie. And one thing that I wanted to add is this council has taken a very strong position on, essentially putting all hands on deck when it comes to any options to deal with housing issues. We've stricken a great partnership with Habitat for Humanity, for example, where when Habitat comes forward with properties, permits and development charges are waived. And we work with them to find properties. And now whenever we have surplus properties at the city, it's circulated amongst our partners, both Habitat, I believe others like Family Services as well, to potentially see if they can use them for potential options for building or renovating and creating affordable housing units. And we've seen these come forward, and we've seen some success with those already, but we also have a community improvement plan that is coming to deal with specifically with affordable housing across our community, where council and the city will be offering incentives specific to any developers or anybody coming forward to create more affordable housing units. So we have been very aggressive with making sure that we are pushing the options and pushing every potential department in the city to participate where we can to make sure that affordable housing becomes a reality. So thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Yelena. I'm going to move on to the questions now. If you have a question, you can either hit the raise hand portion. Otherwise, there is a Q&A function. I will ask that you just keep it to one question. I am quickly going to go through the question and answers that I see already. There's a couple of questions in there. The first one from David Hanna: what is the status for the new main Windsor Public Library? Can you provide schedule for site selection and new build proposal and capital funding? So that proposal we had gone out to the community for expressions of interest to come back with any plans or ideas for a private developer to induce a development in the downtown that would also include a library. Those plans, we did receive, I believe, 4 or 5 submissions. We did narrow it down to, I believe, 3. Those plans are currently being vetted and negotiated, and the plan should be coming back to council. I expect them to come back over the next 6 weeks or so. We had heard that they might come back in November, but because budget and everything is coming up. So once we see what those expressions of interest provide, We may either decide to go with one of the proponents or decide that those negotiations did not work, and then look at charting a new path for that. There's a question about the Windsor Regional Hospital investment at Hotel Dieu. We don't have those details. That is Ministry of Health and negotiations with the hospital group at this point. So we don't know what the services exactly will be at Hotel Dieu. And the Legacy Beacon, what will happen with the present viaduct bridge at Riverside Drive? Nothing at this point. The Legacy Beacon will be built into the embankment, basically where the playground is currently, and it will go right up until the rail cut there in the bridge. So the second question is, what are the plans for the gully west of Karen between University and Riverside? That rail cut is privately owned. That was part of a potential development that sees that land plus the land west of there, as well as the land that encompasses the CBC building. They did put in plans for potential rezoning to do a major development there that would see condos built in that area, but they have not come forward with any concrete plans. These were all speculation, but that cut and gully is all privately owned and part of a larger swath of land that goes all the way, including the CBC lands and some of the land between Salter Street, which is just west of the gully there. I don't see any other hands up at the moment. Okay, one more. Can you tell me the outcome of the pool survey taking on keeping the pool at 80 Knox open? What kind of response did you get? How do I get to or find out the results of the survey taken and where it shows the community response? I'll see if Ray is on the call from Parks. I don't recall specifically the survey. I don't think included keeping the pool open. I think that was part of the decision to move it. Myra, I think you were you attended or were watching that council meeting, I believe. So we did. Council did agree to basically close the pool at 80 Knox. Entered into an agreement with the University of Windsor to move services to the new Lancer Center, and then also make that part of the reimagining of 80 Knox with what would be a total of a $42 million investment. But I'll ask Ray or Jen if they can elaborate on the question about the survey more specifically.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and through you, Councillor. There was, first of all, to answer the second part of your question, you can access the full report as well as the survey results going to the city website, as all the council reports are listed there. I believe, and Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, there was a question regarding would you be willing to use the pool at the new Lancer Center. And if memory serves me correct, it was about 60% of the people were in favor or willing to use the pool at the Lancer Center. But as the councillor said, it was a council decision at the end of the day whether or not to offer swimming at one of our I guess West End recreation facilities, as well as adding a new community center as part of the 80 Knox expansion.
Great, thanks, Ray. The next question, I see Bob both has his hand up, but he wrote in the chat, elaborate on alley reimagination, including lighting and paving. So the alley standards report will come back and create minimum standards. So the minimum standards will probably have to do with the paving, but also potentially safety issues, including sight lines with brush and different, how people tend to the alleys in the back. Obviously, there will be different standards for grass alleys, paved alleys, or crushed stone alleys. So the committee that is being stricken is sort of a wide range of administration that will come back with options, but also they will also touch upon, I'm expecting them to touch upon things like safety issues as well, sightline issues, those types of things. So once the minimum standards have been set, similar to how we have minimum standards for, say, sidewalks or roads, then we would follow and adhere to those standards, so that if an alley falls below that standard, then it's on the list for repaving or work for, cleaning up the brush along the sides, for example. So those things are not known exactly yet, but will be coming back in the report to council from administration with the different options available to set those minimum standards. And we can probably expect that sometime next year, I'm hoping. Hopefully before summer, but I don't know if that will be the case. We've got another question from Lana. Are any statistics being kept regarding the outreach workers connecting homeless with resources and the success of those resource connections? Yes, there's extensive data and statistics being kept. I can say confidently that, and Debbie can, I see she turned on her camera, but probably more than ever, the organizations are working together and collaborating. She can speak to the HIFIS system as well, which is basically the database of people experiencing homelessness, but also one of the unique things about the outreach is the relationships that are forged between the outreach workers and those experiencing homelessness or other issues on the street, so that when contact is made, they can say that, this is the 4th time they've made contact this year. They've also referred them to this agency, or been able to bring them to a shelter for the night and things like that. But I'll let Debbie expand on that and describe the HIFIS system as well.
Sure. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, just following up on the Councillor's comment about HIFIS. HIFIS stands for the Homelessness Individuals and Families Information System, and it's a federally mandated program that collects data on homelessness in communities. We have that, it's been in our community for about a year. And anybody that is touched upon in the homelessness serving sector is inputted into this database. So whenever an outreach worker engages with someone, their first order is to, first of all, develop a relationship, talk about their options related to shelter. And if the person is willing to engage, they are also placed on the by names prioritized list, which is our central list where we know people by name, that's why it's called by names list, who are experiencing homelessness. And what that does is that engages not only just the homelessness sector, but any other sectors that are part of that. We have over 30 organizations who come together on a weekly basis to understand folks experiencing homelessness and to offer supports, primarily housing, but other supports that they need. And then our outreach workers are really good about following up, and they will continue that engagement until such time as the individual is ready to receive services. And they have a very good knowledge of where people are located, and will go back to those locations as frequently as they need to.
Thanks, Debbie. A question from an anonymous attendee asking, can anything be done to encourage business owners to paint the plywood on storefronts and keep the windows clean? As far as basically at this point, we do have a bylaw that does not allow for plywood to go up and cover the windows. We do have a specific incident. I know one specific new one downtown that I reached out to Rob. I see he turned on his camera, and he'll be able to better explain it. But in essence, we don't want windows in front of buildings to be boarded up with plywood. The BIA has tried to work with some of the business owners that do have empty storefronts as far as just dirty windows or large for lease signs. That has been a challenge, seeing as a lot of the owners or the property owners are not local. And so it's hard to both connect with them as well as get them to care as much as they should. But I'll ask Rob to extrapolate more on the bylaw with respect to boarding up windows.
So thank you, Councillor, for the question. Our property standards bylaw does not allow long-term plywood on buildings. The intent of the bylaw is only to allow plywood on it if the building's been damaged for fire or vehicular accidents or things of that nature, but only for a period of 120 days. The bylaw does not allow for long-term installation of plywood. And even at that, if they do put plywood on the building, it's supposed to be treated to match the balance of the building. And as you noted, we do try to work with property owners to rehabilitate their buildings, to restore those glass fronts so that they're complying with the bylaw. If there's particular buildings that someone wants us to take a look at, they can call 311 and we can go and investigate and we can apply the bylaw accordingly.
Thanks, Rob. We have another question from Robin. Can free parking after 5 p.m. and on weekends be implemented on the streets, as well as 2-hour free parking in the garages to encourage people to come downtown? I was hoping we could get through an entire meeting without a question about parking. This is an issue that we deal with a lot, but the simple answer would be no. And simply because free parking or cheap parking or free parking at certain times of day does not attract anybody to downtown. So the issue, we oftentimes focus on this idea of free parking or think that parking or the cost of parking is keeping people away from downtown. When there is a good enough event and a good enough reason to be downtown, and traditionally this week would be a week where the Windsor International Film Festival would be downtown, we have some of the cheapest parking rates in the province. And in fact, we have some of the most available parking in the province, most spaces per capita, and the lowest income per capita for those spaces. And so we already have some of the cheapest parking in Ontario. The issue also then becomes, as we lower those fees, the tax base then is needed to subsidize the cost of parking, the renovating or the maintenance at the parking garages, the things that we've seen for years. When we saw the parking garages deteriorate, it's because we were giving away free parking and the parking couldn't pay for itself. And so to take money from the tax base away from other priorities to pay for parking is not something I would feel comfortable with endorsing. When we've worked with the different BIAs, there are available programs. You'll see, for example, Ottawa Street sometimes will do free parking on Saturdays to encourage when they do in tandem with sidewalk sale, for example. So there are things that are available. We now also have the app that allows you to download the app and pay from your app. So if you're in a restaurant and your parking meter is about to run out, you will get a notification and you can simply top up your parking from the comforts of your restaurant seat. So these are options that we have implemented. We've been very successful with implementing those, as well as other programs when the BIAs or other businesses want to do special promotions. But we've also actually seen that we're able to maintain our parking structures and maintain the parking infrastructure better because we are finally bringing in a more respectable amount for parking. And so I would also challenge to say that any great downtown you've been to does not have free parking. And when you go to some of the bigger cities, the world-class cities, you're often paying $20, $30, $40 for a parking spot. So the $1.75, I believe, that's an hour that we currently have, as well as the security and everything in our parking garages, I think is more than a good value. And I think that what we offer now is already an exceptionally good price, as far as, especially when you compare it across the province with other municipalities. So I'll leave it at that, because I know, this is often a contentious issue, but I think for anybody looking for that, it's one of those that I simply won't agree with. I saw Bill turned on his camera. I don't know if Bill has anything to add to that, but Bill is in charge of parking enforcement in our parking division.
Thank you for that, Councillor. And through you, We also have, when we were in the lockdown, we started a 15-minute free through the app, which allows you to pull up to a spot through the app, type in zone 3800. It'll give you 15 minutes of free parking, either run into a restaurant for a food order to pick up or run into one of the shops downtown to pick up a pre-order purchase that way. That's going to continue on well into the next year, and then we'll revisit it then if we need to shut it off or keep it going.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. The next question, and I'll ask, and I'm not sure who might be available from our cultural department. In the cultural master plan, there was 1% of construction costs was to be set aside for public art. And it's never been utilized, even though it was passed by City Council. And it hasn't been utilized for public structures like City Hall or Aquatic Center. So I'm wondering, Ray, if you can address that. I don't know if that specific element, the 1%, needed a specific approval. I know it was a recommendation. I don't know if that was ever formally approved, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, thank you for the question again through you, Councillor. Yeah, it was approved, and it's actually, the reason it didn't apply to the Aquatic Center, the Culture Master Plan was approved after the construction of the Aquatic Center. And as far as the new build at City Hall, we are still in the works of developing the public art plan, which we still plan to incorporate as part of the City Hall. So we are still working on it. There was a couple of delays, but with COVID and everything, but we still plan on doing it. So we do plan on expanding our cultural visibility across the city, and it's definitely included, and we definitely plan on moving this initiative forward. So thank you for the question.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Another question from Anonymous. If someone on the street needs social assistance, is there a number we can call besides the non-emergency police? Yelena or Debbie, I know that we created sort of a fact sheet or a poster, and I want to say it's on the website, but do we have, is it possible to put the link into the question and answer portion?
Yes, it's the help is around the corner flyer. Yes, I'm going to try and do that, and I'll hopefully have that up shortly.
If not, whoever, sorry, to the anonymous attendee, if not, they can email me and I can email you a copy of that flyer. It's really good just outlining when you should call police, when you should call outreach, because that it'll help decipher, you know, when you should call 911, when non-emergency, and when potentially directly to outreach. So, and sometimes there may be a wait, but I know with the addition of the 2 outreach workers, they're looking to do a dispatch service that they're hoping to have about a 20 to 40 minute time to address the issue. So if
Councillor, I believe
it's
been sent. I believe it's been sent. Stephen Lynn from our office sent it. So
oh, perfect.
Should be there. But I can email it to you if you'd like, if anybody else would like a copy of it.
And Councillor, residents and businesses can also always contact 311 for a copy of the poster. At one point, our outreach workers actually went door to door to the businesses downtown and to many of the apartment buildings and provided posters free of charge that they could put in their lobbies or their businesses. And so if there's any business online or apartment building or resident who would like that, they can also request it through 311 and we'll be sure to get it to them.
Perfect, thank you. I'll ask Rob to turn his camera on again because there's just a follow-up looking for the enforcement mechanism. If a business does leave the plywood beyond the 120 days, I want you to explain it because I have to say this is a frustrating issue for me. So I'll ask Rob if you can just explain sort of, you know, the process with the courts and everything after that point.
Sure. So first we'd have to issue an order under the property standards bylaw. The order has an appeal mechanism. As you know, you sit on the the committee that overhears some of the appeals of that. And so when we issue the order, they're typically given 30 days to repair the window. So that would be removing the plywood and putting the glass back in the frame opening. If they, assuming they don't appeal it, we typically follow up after that 30 days. If it's not in compliance, we try to make contact with the property owners, assess why they haven't complied with that order. If it warranted, we would issue a letter indicating that we would give them additional time to repair it. And that's typically 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on the severity of the defect or our discussion with the property owner. After that period of time, we would be in a position to do a review to send the file over to prosecution to the courts. That there's usually a week or two delay, not delay, but necessarily, but getting all the documentation together to identify who the property owners are and all the other court documents that we need to review. We file that information with the courts. This would be a Part 3 charge, similar to getting a speeding ticket type thing. So it would be processed through the provincial offenses courts. We would be given a date, and that's typically 6 to 8 weeks for a first appearance date. And all that date is just to exchange information on it. We usually use that period of time to try to open some dialogue with the property owner to bring them into compliance before it goes any further into the court system. But if they're reluctant to work with us, from the time the first appearance and the time we get a trial, it could be anywhere between 3 months to 8 months before the matter is resolved in the courts. And when it is resolved in the courts, I like to be clear that it's a matter of just penalties. It doesn't necessarily force the property owner to comply with our bylaw. We would still have to apply additional enforcement after that conviction to get them to comply with our order. So I hope that kind of frames the lengthy process for property standards when we don't get compliance with our orders.
So I can attest to how frustrating it is, and I think Rob will agree. You know, 10 to 12 years ago, there was a lot of issues and a lot of vacant buildings, and I think we were a lot softer because of the financial position everybody was put in. Today's a very different reality. It's a very different market reality, and we want both commercial and residential property owners to not only take care of their properties, but keep it viable and keep tenants in them and actually work to actually have those units filled. I chair the Property Standards Committee, and I think Rob can agree to this, that we have taken the most aggressive stance, I believe, on every single issue that's come before us. Unfortunately, as you just heard, 120 days is, up to 4 months. By the time you end up in the courts, it can easily be up to a year before you may actually see action. And even then, sometimes they at times choose to pay the fine and not take care of the action. And so it has been frustrating. I mean, there's a file we're dealing with now at Property Standards that has been in and out of the committee for 2.5 years. So there are a lot of frustrations, but I can tell you that both administratively and from a council perspective, we are taking as aggressive a position as possible to get those houses rehabilitated or occupied as much as possible. So I don't see any other questions. Anonymous attendee, could a dog park be added downtown? Ray, I know we finally came up with a process for creating or looking to add dog parks. Can you speak to it as far as where the closest one may be to the general downtown core vicinity?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I see Mr. Chaco has also signed on. I'll let James take this one. Thanks, James.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Councillor Bortolin. In terms of the dog park policy, which Council did pass in 2019, the policy does spell out certain criteria that make a park suitable for a dog park. Based on the criteria at hand, which certainly does, one particular key component is the amount of available space to to install a dog park would limit some of the smaller parks that are within the downtown core. So I think looking and expanding out, you're getting into some of the parks that are going to be a little bit south of Wyandotte and in the Erie Street area, something like a Weigel Park or even a Lansbury. I know it's a little outside of your ward, Councillor, but those type of parks are really what you need. You really do need to have a community or regional park that has the available space, because the dog park policy does indicate an available space of 1.5 acres for a dog park to allow for both small and large dog park components within the greater dog park.
Thanks, James. And one of the issues, you know, I recall somebody asking if we could add a dog park to Mitchell Park, which is on Giles. One of the issues, and James can nod if, is also just proximity to houses. So because Mitchell, for example, is basically surrounded on 3 sides immediately by backyards, anywhere that the dog park would be put would be generally towards the perimeter of the park, meaning that there might be, you know, 10, 12 barking dogs right behind somebody's property line. And so we've tended to make sure that they're in parks that are not immediately adjacent to residential neighborhoods and immediately adjacent to properties where obviously people trying to enjoy their backyard might not like barking dogs behind their gate. So I think that when we look at the next iteration of, or the next time we're looking at the master plan, we can try to work on a location for a dog park downtown. It just gets very tight with the density of the homes and everything like that. So thanks, James. I see Robin just had a follow-up on the plywood issue. Why is enforcement not being done in the light of all the plywood on downtown windows? As far as I'm aware, the locations that I know of are being dealt with through enforcement. As mentioned, the length of time and the work on that enforcement doesn't mean that the plywood would be removed immediately. So if there are locations that you feel haven't been addressed, you could call 311 to issue the complaint. That will trigger building to go out or to communicate with the owner. I'm assuming, I know that the BIA and myself have been diligent in calling them in when we see them. So I think for the most part, Mr. Vanny's department is aware of most of the buildings that have plywood. If not, if you feel, Robin, that there are buildings that are not being addressed through enforcement, please reach out via 311 and that will be addressed by the building department. So Bob's question, could you remind me of the time frame for the H4 alternative? I'll look to either Yelena or Debbie. I know that the process is going to take some time to find a location, and then obviously if there's a new build and things like that. So can you speak to that timeline, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I can go ahead and take that one. So yes, you are correct. There is a process before us, as Mr. Coney had mentioned earlier. You know, obviously the H4, the Housing Homelessness Help Hub, was born in response to COVID to allow for individuals, you know, to have a place to go during the day, but also to allow for proper physical distancing at the current shelters, including the Welcome Center for Women, Family and Children's, the Salvation Army, and the Mission. The health unit has imposed, in response to COVID, some restrictions on the number of individuals who can attend the existing shelters. We are still remain in a pandemic. And so we're not sure, once the province moves us from a pandemic to an endemic, whether or not those restrictions will be lifted by the health unit, or if they will remain in place to ensure proper infection control protocols. So for right now, we continue to provide this service to the community. As Mr. Coney mentioned, we are looking, we support about 100 individuals on any given day, 7 days a week. We are in the process and have just entered into an agreement with a consultant to start doing the work on a potential future location, a feasibility study, potential square footage that would be required. And the next step after that would then be obviously to try to secure some funding from upper levels of government for a permanent home. So, it's dependent on the pandemic. It's dependent on the IPAC requirements of, the health unit. It's dependent on availability of funding from upper levels of government. So still a little bit of a journey to go. So no definitive timeline right now.
So the feasibility study, that's the first step that will probably come back first. Can we say early mid next year to assume that would potentially come back?
Yes, I would say that, Councillor.
Okay. Thanks, Bob, for the question. The next question from anonymous attendee: can we add a water feature on the riverfront for cooling off in the summer, like a fountain you can walk through? So I see James just turned on his camera. I don't think that there are any water features like that necessarily part of the riverfront CRIP plan, but I do know that right now there is current discussions on the Civic Esplanade, which is the area that goes from City Hall to the waterfront in a straight line that encompasses Charles Clark Square and some of the other properties there. And I know that there was conversation and discussion about putting a water feature in front of City Hall that would also, in the winter time, potentially be some sort of skating rink. So I know that one was a very popular item in the public consultation, and I think was included in some of the preliminary drawings, at least that I've been privy to see. So I would guess that there will be some water feature there in front of City Hall, but maybe James or Jen can comment on if anything like that could be done along the waterfront as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so absolutely, you're correct. As part of the City Hall Esplanade plans, there are the potential to have that sort of mixed splash pad / skating rink. As part of the potential plans for some redevelopment plans along the riverfront, whether as part of the Festival Plaza or as part of the plans closer to the Walkerville theming area, there is a potential to have, if not a full splash pad, a small sort of reflecting area. And I apologize, the dog apparently doesn't want to behave. He got really excited by the dog park question earlier. So, but yeah, there is that possibility, but there is nothing currently in the Parks Master Plan specifically calling for it.
Okay, thanks, James. Yeah, I do know that it was a very popular answer on the public consultation for the Civic Esplanade. So I would not be surprised if it makes the final design and submission that will go to council eventually. So I don't see any other questions at the moment. And I think Robin's hand was for the question earlier. So we are getting to 7 o'clock. It is just past 7 o'clock. So I wanted to take a moment to thank everybody. Thank you for everybody who was in attendance, understanding that this, online is not the same as in person. So hopefully next year we'll be doing these in person. We do expect council meetings to be back in person, hopefully at the end of November, if not in December. We would expect to be in person, or at least a hybrid version of it. Thank you to all the staff, administration, and other agencies that were on the call tonight. Appreciate it. Anybody who did not get a chance to either ask a question or was too shy to use the question and answer feature, by all means, do not hesitate to email me with any questions or follow-ups, whether it be about the issues downtown. Bob, if you wanted to follow up with respect to the H4 Center, do not hesitate to to reach out. One last question quickly. I see Barbara has said, when can we expect University Avenue West to be paved? The EA, the environmental assessment on that, is just being completed as we speak. I'm expecting it to come to council in the next probably couple of months for approval. The EA, the environmental assessment, encompasses all of University Avenue, so from the bridge all the way to into the downtown core. So once it's approved, you will see funding start to be allocated. The entire thing is probably at least a 10-year project, if not more. So realistically, different portions of it will be paved in different years. So once it comes to council for the EA, there will be some capital dollars set aside for it, and then over probably 10+ years, you will see segments, probably 3 or 4 blocks at a time, done year over year, until the whole area connects from the bridge all the way to downtown. So on that note, we'll cut it off and we'll say thank you everybody. Again, anybody who has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Have a good night. Thank you for all staff who are in attendance. Good night, everyone.